Begin this broadcast with heavy hearts, reflection, and hope for the 19 kids and 2 teachers killed 2 years ago today. Gunned down inside Robb Elementary School. This morning, we're remembering those innocent children and those teachers. Their faces and memories cover your screen. President Joe Biden wrote a letter to the families of the victims. It said in part, "I know that even after years have passed, there are days it feels like you just got the news yesterday. While there are no words that will ease the pain you continue to feel, I pray you find comfort in reflecting on those memories and all they meant to you." Joining us now is Sofia Ojeda. Sofia and I both covered this tragedy at different times. I know you were there within hours of that shooting taking place. I went to Uvalde when school resumed that fall, and I know for all of us this assignment was and still is so difficult. But I know for you as a journalist, but as a mother, being on the ground there within hours was extremely heavy.
It was very heavy, and it's still just looking at those images that we were just seeing in the pictures of the victims. It still jars your memory, right? I remember being in a live truck the afternoon that it happened, and we start getting these messages of there's a shooting, and you start getting the number of victims is like maybe 3, 5. The number kept going up. The number kept going up, and your heart is just drops when you are hearing how those numbers just kept going up at the victims and those who were hurt. And we got in the vehicle. We were like, okay, several crews are going to Uvalde. It was that night we drove in, and we got to the school the next morning at like 2 in the morning. And it was so emotional. It was so difficult to be there. The sadness, the difficulty, you could feel it. You could feel it. It was like a heavy coat. Just the uncertainty of the community, the families not knowing, not having answers. And I felt it, and I was reporting there on the scene, and obviously my feelings do not even come close to what the victims' families had to go through that day. Look, as a parent, you expect that when you send your children to school every single day, that they come home safely. Whether it's they're dealing with a bully or another situation, this is the most horrific thing that a family, that a parent can even imagine. And this should have never happened, right? So these are to keep telling the story is so important. We have to keep telling the story. We have to keep digging for answers. We have to keep pressuring officials. We have to keep demanding for change, and making it so difficult for something like this to ever happen again. The devastation, we can still feel it, even talking about it 2 years later. It's so hard for me to talk about and think about without, the tears coming again.
The emotions.
Yes.
And I know for these families, they continue to fight. They fight every single day. Not only are they fighting the fight for others, but they're also fighting the internal demons that they've been left with the scars from their children being ripped away from them. I had COVID actually when this happened, and so I was watching from home, and I remember that at first there was a lot of confusion. Was this actually happening? Did this news organization who initially reported it, did they get it wrong? And as we started learning more of the details, the scope, the impact of this was the magnitude was just overwhelming. And I remember being there on this scene months later. So this happened May 24th. I was there in August for when school returned. And I remember speaking to a gentleman who lived across the street from Robb Elementary. He attended that school. He was the first class to graduate from that elementary school. Yeah. That is the school where his children went. And that day, that May 24th day, his grandson was in that class, was in that school. And he remembered coming home and not knowing what was going on, but he saw his grandson wave to him as he was being escorted out of the building in a line, and he was just waving to him. And he's like, I still had no idea what was going on. And then when I learned, I was so relieved to know that my grandson was okay, because I was one of the lucky ones to see him waiting, but I didn't know what was going on. I thought it maybe was a fire drill. But everywhere you go in that community, there are signs, and there are signs of tragedy, but there are also signs of hope. And I think, you know, regardless of your thoughts and your ideas, where you're at, I think it's these faces that we have to remember, and as we move forward, to reflect on what was lost in hope of having positive change.
Yeah, you have to. And that even when it's so difficult to talk about, we have to continue to tell their stories and to speak their names, and, you know, again, push officials to figure out what happened. We know that obviously the response in this case was catastrophic. You know, that's been under investigation since day one. And now you're seeing people being let go. You're seeing people
accountability to some
extent exactly is occurring, and it's not enough. You know, more needs to be done, and you do have, you know, the settlement. The families did settle with the city of Uvalde.
Just this week on Wednesday.
Yes, and it was how much was it?
It was $2 million.
Okay.
And that's from it could have been more. That's from the insurance fund from the city. But the families came forward and they said, hey, look, we don't want to ask for more because we do not want to plunge the rest of the city, the residents of the city,
the community,
into bankruptcy. The city into bankruptcy. So we don't want to cast more harm, more hurt upon the city.
And that itself says so much about these families and these parents, is that even though in their hardest time that they're going through right now, the loss of a family member, a loss of a child, but in such a horrific way, and at the hands, really, obviously, of this gunman, but things that shouldn't have happened, for them to think about the community as a whole speaks volumes of these families, to say, you know what, we don't want to bankrupt the city that we live in, because if we do this, then it's going to do that. It just speaks volumes to their character.
I remember your reporting from that morning. I was, well, you were there for a few days, right?
We were there, so the night before into the next day, and then we came back the next night. So probably 30 hours, like just a full.
And then did you return?
Not until a year later, for the 1 year mark.
For the 1 year mark. What was that moment like for you 1 year later?
1 year later. You kind of step into a time warp, right? Because you come in, but then as soon as you get to
that
school,
that corner,
and it all comes back to you. The day of, the chaos, the uncertainty,
smell.
But it was also beautiful seeing the memorial and seeing so many people, so many community members coming and putting down flowers and just being together, and that unity, you know, that this horrific tragedy brought is just a sliver of a silver lining, but it's still heavy. It was with a heavy heart that everybody was there. But it's the important work that we need to do. We need to be there, and we need to just support the families as best we can and be able to continue to get their voices out there.
And prioritize change in a positive way that can keep more people, more lives safe. I know too, for you, when I was there in August of that year, those students who attended Robb Elementary, they were bused to other locations, and so we were going to those campuses, talking with parents who otherwise would have been at Robb Elementary. Their students would have been there for the first day of class, and I remember that fear being so real for them. You know, bringing their kids to what's supposed to be a safe space. You know,
we're living in a whole new time. Like you and I growing up, we did fire drills, right?
Yeah.
And I know that, speaking to my own children, they do these lockdown drills. and they're scary. They're scary for them. And there was one incident where my daughter was in her preschool. They had a lockdown situation. They had a real lockdown because they saw a kid walking by with a BB gun. It ended up being a BB gun, but they locked down the whole school. And she said she was in the closet with her teacher and all the students, and she said, "Mom, I was shaking." And I said, I know, honey. I know that it can be scary, and these are drills that are important to keep you safe. But I can't imagine what it must be like for our teachers and for our kids these days.
And I know since this tragedy, we've talked a lot about solutions, right? Aside from the politics, we've talked about physical solutions. So whether it be AI technology being used in infrastructures of existing cameras, or whether it be a physical door lock, a mechanism that you put on the door. So there are plenty of conversations that are happening. Those conversations will continue. I know this afternoon, State Senator Roland Gutierrez will join the families of these victims as well as survivors of that mass shooting in a candlelight vigil that will take place at 5:30 this afternoon in Uvalde at the amphitheater there. But certainly our thoughts are with these families today and with that community.
Yeah, today and every day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate you, Zach.